The Stone Zone, entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
You are now entering the Stone Zone. Well, President Donald Trump has said it. The Joe Biden auto pen pardon scandal could be perhaps the greatest single scandal in American history. Now, the House Oversight Committee, chaired by James Comer of Kentucky, has submitted a report to the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, arguing that the cognitive state of former President Joe Biden was so severe that he was unaware of pardons and other measures signed via auto pen that they ought to be deemed, therefore, null and void. Individuals, as you may recall, pardoned in the final days of Biden's administration included his crack-addled son, Hunter, the tranny-loving former head of the Joint Chiefs, Mark Milley. He's the general that contacted the Chinese to assure them that before carrying out any order of the commander-in-chief regarding China, he would warn them in advance. I think that's treason. The baby-killing mad scientist Anthony Fauci, along with every member of the disgraceful January 6th committee who fabricated for an investigation and committed treason against the United States in their efforts to weaponize the government against President Donald Trump and his supporters. But beyond that, for reasons I never understood, Biden also pardoned a series of hardcore criminals, drug traffickers, murderers, child molesters, and others, many of whom never applied for clemency. Who was behind those pardons and why they were granted has never been determined. The president agrees with Congressman Comer. Comer said the Biden auto pen presidency will go down as the biggest scandal in U.S. history. Comer believes that Biden's aides sought to deceive the public about the true nature of Biden's decline. I think we've seen more than sufficient evidence of that. And according to Chairman Comer, they colluded to mislead the public, taking the extraordinary measures they took to sustain the appearance of presidential authority as Biden's capacity to function independently continued to diminish. Now, President Trump could, some say, invalidate the pardons of these criminals. I'm not an attorney, but I don't believe that he has that unilateral authority. I think the way this has to work is the Justice Department has to prosecute somebody rightfully based on facts and evidence placed before a grand jury who is on the pardon list. I would nominate Dr. Fauci. Clearly charges of lying under oath to Congress. That's what they prosecuted me for. That's what they're currently prosecuting James Comey, the former FBI director, for. Obviously, the left thinks it's an important crime because they had to fabricate it against me. But he could, at a minimum, be charged with that. He would then respond through his lawyers, saying that he was not subject to prosecution because he has a blanket pardon. That question could then be adjudicated in the courts. Trial court would rule on it. It could then potentially go to appeal and then ultimately go to the Supreme Court, who could then decide whether all of Joe Biden's pardons, including those against members of the January 6th committee like Liz Cheney and Adam Schiff, Jamie Raskin, and others, are valid or invalid. Biden's brain was mush at the time these pardons were made, so I think it's abundantly clear. And even if his brain was functioning well, Biden was never a legitimate president to begin with. In my opinion, he came into office because of a tsunami of fraud that washed over inner city voting centers and crucial battlegrounds on the night of election 2020. I'm sorry, but I'm skeptical that the counting stopped at exactly 3 a.m. in multiple states, and out of nowhere came 300,000 plus printed mail-in ballots, many of whom, at least in Michigan, based on eyewitnesses, had never been folded. Therefore, they had never clearly been mailed. We've seen the video footage of ballots being delivered to the counting center in Detroit. Then, of course, the January 6th committees, Mark Milley, Hunter Biden, especially the genocidal tyrant Anthony Fauci, all deserve to be tried and convicted in a court of law. They deserve a fair trial, something I didn't get in Washington, D.C. But the time for excuses is really over. It's time to challenge these pardons. I have laid out here how the Attorney General and the Deputy Attorney General can do so by charging someone who will then use their auto pen pardon as their defense, and this matter can become adjudicated. Meanwhile, James Comey, the FBI director charged in the Eastern District of Virginia, has asked that the charges against him in a formal motion be dismissed, claiming in the motion that questioning from Senator Ted Cruz was fundamentally ambiguous and that Comey's answers were literally true. So therefore, Comey should not be charged. I disagree with that determination. The question centered around Comey's knowledge and direction of others to leak classified information that was detrimental to President Donald Trump. And he very clearly said he did not do so, and he very clearly did do so, both directing Andrew McCabe to do so and directing an attorney associate of his named Richmond, who had had represented Comey in the past, but in this capacity was a special government employee, which is an arrangement under which you work for the government being paid nothing, but you do retain governmental authority in these positions. Comey's lawyers are arguing that the Department of Justice under Trump is creating confusion by posing an imprecise question and then seeking to exploit that confusion by placing an after-the-fact nefarious interpretation on the ensuing benign answer. That is, of course, gibberish. I would point out that James Comey has a previous motion pending in which he challenges the authority of the interim U.S. Attorney in the Eastern District of Virginia, Lindsay Halligan, who gets denigrated constantly in the mainstream media as just an insurance lawyer, when in fact she was a partner of a major law firm where she headed their civil litigation department and has very substantial experience in front of civil juries, probably more experience in front of a jury than many currently at the Justice Department. She was appointed to this position by President Donald Trump after it was learned that the previous Eastern District Virginia U.S. Attorney, appointed by Donald Trump, but not confirmed by the Senate, ultimately confirmed by the federal judges in the district, originally recommended, it turns out, by Governor Glenn Youngkin, a Republican, but approved by the two U.S. senators from Virginia. That's a hint right there. He never disclosed the fact, broken right here on the Stone Zone, that he had a material conflict of interest. You see, James Comey's father-in-law, that is to say his wife's father, is the godfather to James Comey's children. The man in question, Richard Cullen, an attorney, had also represented Comey in the past, yet another material conflict of interest. The law says that if there is a conflict of interest or even the appearance of a conflict of interest, a prosecutor must recuse, but he didn't do so. Instead, he prepared a 51-page report arguing as to why James Comey should not be held to the same standards that others have been held to when it comes to lying to Congress. Now, I stress to you that this is just one narrow area of vulnerability for Comey. I think he has broader vulnerability in the seditious conspiracy that began in July of 2017 in a White House meeting chaired by Barack Obama himself, in which Joe Biden, Susan Rice, the National Security Advisor, FBI Director Comey, CIA Director John Brennan, the Director of National Information at the time, General James Clapper, and others, began the phony Russian collusion hoax conspiracy. That's where they planned to use totally fabricated evidence, the so-called Steele dossier, which John Brennan knew as CIA director had been commissioned and fabricated by Hillary Clinton's campaign, as the rationale for both FISA warrants from the FISA court to spy on Donald Trump and his campaign, as well as the rationale later for the appointment of Robert Mueller to conduct an investigation, which there really was no probable cause, meaning despite their overwhelming legal power and their unlimited budget and their unlimited manpower and staff of attorneys, they could find no Russian collusion against Donald Trump. Ultimately, after Robert Mueller's final report became public, they tried to shift the accusation from Russian collusion to obstruction of justice, saying that Trump had sought to obstruct their investigation. But if their investigation was never legitimate to begin with, that argument didn't work. You may remember when Robert Mueller, in an attempt to reinflate the credibility of his failed investigation, after he himself admitted that he'd found no evidence of Russian collusion, they had him testify before Congress, and that was an unmitigated disaster. It became very clear that not only did he not write his final report, he probably never read it, that he was in some type of Joe Biden-type mental decline. When asked about Fusion GPS, the company that fabricated the phony Steele dossier, he said he had never heard of them. When he was asked whether he knew that the prosecutor in my case had previously worked for Hillary Clinton, he said he was unfamiliar with that, even though she was his law partner. So it is abundantly clear here that James Comey will first try to question the appointment of Lindsay Halligan. Now, I believe Lindsay Halligan, who was appointed to prosecute this case by President Trump, I believe her appointment is valid under the federal law that governs vacancies. You see, the president appoints the U.S. attorney. That U.S. attorney is theoretically supposed to be confirmed by the U.S. Senate. When Joe Biden was president, Republican senators voted regularly to confirm his U.S. attorney appointments, even in states that had 2 Republican senators. Democrats now have not returned that courtesy. In fact, virtually none of, I think 3 or 4 of Donald Trump's U.S. attorney appointees have now been formally confirmed by the Senate. They can hold that position for 120 days until the Senate acts. If at that point the Senate has not acted, the federal judges in the district do have the authority to appoint somebody, but the president has the authority to fire that person and appoint yet another interim U.S. attorney who can, again, serve for 120 days until the U.S. Senate acts. This is, I think, all valid under the Government Vacancies Act, and I think the president's appointment of Halligan is solid, but Comey seeks to knock out his entire indictment based on a question to her authority. Now, it's possible, by the way, the trial court judge could rule wrongly on that, incorrectly. The appeals court, this is a very liberal district, could also rule incorrectly, but that could ultimately be decided in the U.S. Supreme Court. The blue slip problem, the problem of U.S. senators who are Democrats just refusing, based on nothing other than politics, to approve Donald Trump's appointments to the U.S. attorney, is a level of dysfunction from the Democrat Party that we have never seen, and demonstrates that they will do anything possible to stop Donald Trump. You've seen the tsunami of tyranny from federal judges arguing that he can't negotiate tariff deals, that he can't deport dangerous illegal immigrants. And of course, once those get to the Supreme Court, he has literally won them all. But it is just another demonstration that they will use the judicial branch of government to the extent that they possibly can to try to detract, to water down or delay Donald Trump's America First agenda to make the country great again. It is nothing less than tyranny. There's no place in the country where there's more of this than Chicago. Coming up, Mark Vargas, the editor of the Illinois Review, is going to tell us about the latest shenanigans of Governor J.B. Pritzker and Mayor Brandon Johnson and their attempts to harass and endanger ICE agents who are merely trying to fulfill their legal obligations and duties under the law. You're listening to the Stone Zone right here on the Red Apple Audio Networks. Please don't go away.
If you're looking to create, grow, and sustain your wealth, download and subscribe to the Pain Points of Wealth podcast at BeBullish.com with Bob, Ryan, and Chris Payne. It's your podcast for market insights, money tips, and real talk on the economy.
Download and subscribe
at BeBullish.com.
The Stone Zone, entertaining and informative
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back into the Stone Zone. I certainly appreciate those warm words from Vice President J.D. Vance. It's amazing to me as I talk to people across the country how all eyes are focused on the New York City mayor's race. So now we're asking you to sound off on the big issues impacting voters this election day. So from now through Election Day, you can go to redappleaudionetworks.com/election. That's redappleaudionetworks.com/election and cast your vote. We're talking about crime, the cost of living, transportation, anti-Semitism, homelessness, all of the key issues that are facing the city of New York. Today's question: would you consider leaving New York City if Mamdani, the Democrat, Socialist, Progressive Jihadi, the Democrats have nominated, wins? A new poll says the city could lose up to a quarter of its population if Mamdani becomes mayor. In fact, Andrew Cuomo, the independent candidate, says there will be nobody left in New York City if Mamdani wins. So is the future of New York populations a concern for you? You can cast your vote now with us at redappleaudionetworks.com/elections. Do it right now. So it is interesting. We see this phenomenon that we see in New York City, around the country. Socialist mayoral candidate Katie Wilson in Seattle is receiving pushback for her radical beliefs in favor of defunding the police. Just the other day, Elon Musk reposted on X at least 15 or 20 past tweets where Zoran Mamdani said that he would defund the police, something that he now denies that he will do. In the city of Seattle, which has become overrun with fentanyl zombies and left-wing radicals, it's no longer evidently en vogue to cry about police injustice when the public is demanding more police enforcement because the streets are no longer safe. After first denying that she ever called for defunding the police, Wilson admitted during a mayoral debate this week that she did in fact stand for that position in the recent past. This sounds very much to me like Zoran Mamdani, the Democrat candidate for New York City, who clearly favored defunding the police and now seeks to deny it. Coming up when we come back, Mark Vargas, the editor of the Illinois Review, is going to tell us all about what's going on in Chicago as Governor J.B. Pritzker and Mayor Brandon Johnson endanger the lives of ICE officers merely trying to carry out their duties and responsibilities. You're listening to the Stone Zone here on the Red Apple Audio Networks. Whatever you do, don't touch that dial or continue to follow us online, and we'll be right back.
Getting ready to step into your career era? Set yourself apart with Adobe Creative Cloud Pro for students. Hone your skills with apps like Photoshop, Illustrator, Premiere Pro, and more, powered with the latest in creative AI. Students save over 55% so you can build a portfolio you're proud of. Launch your future with Adobe Creative Cloud Pro for students. Visit adobe.com/students to learn more.
The Stone Zone, entertaining and informative
on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back into the Stone Zone. Well, I think it should be apparent to anyone who's watching that Illinois' billionaire governor, J.B. Pritzker, a rather rotund individual, sees himself as the 2028 Democrat candidate for president and evidently thinks he can get there essentially by thwarting the will of the American people in the last election and doing everything humanly possible to stop President Donald Trump and ICE agents from deporting dangerous illegal criminals from the Windy City of Chicago. He is aided in this endeavor by Mayor Brandon Johnson. Last time I looked, his approval rating as mayor was at 6%, something I've never seen in American politics. Clearly, Pritzker believes that kowtowing to the most radical left wing of the Democrat Party is the way to capture their hearts. There is no better observer of J.B. Pritzker and his political antics, which endanger the public as well as federal agents, than Mark Vargas. He is the editor-in-chief of the Illinois Review, and he joins us now. Mark, welcome to the Stone Zone.
Great to be with you, Roger.
So I'm going to take this in order. Several weeks ago, you reported that Governor J.B. Pritzker and Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson had issued an order to the Chicago police, specifically prohibiting them from protecting or defending ICE agents who may have been in danger during the performance of their duties to arrest in preparation for deportation dangerous illegals in Chicago. And you further made the point, after consulting with a number of legal experts, that they could both personally face legal liability over this policy. So tell us what's going on.
Yeah, Roger, since 2022, Chicago has welcomed over 52,000 illegal aliens under Joe Biden's open border policy, and over $2.5 billion have been spent, taxpayer money, to make sure that these illegal aliens have free health care. But what Pritzker and Johnson have been doing, the executive orders that they've signed that put federal ICE agents, their lives in grave danger, this stand down order where local police, local law enforcement cannot participate and assist federal ICE agents. I've spoken to numerous legal experts and attorneys on both sides of the aisle, and they all agree that there is a strong case for Governor Pritzker and Mayor Johnson's actions that could land them up to 20 years in federal prison. Let me just highlight just very briefly a few of these. 8 U.S. Code 1324. It's a felony to conceal, harbor, or shield illegal aliens from detection. 8 U.S. Code 1373 prohibits local governments from restricting communication between local law enforcement and federal immigration authorities. And finally, 18 U.S. Code 111 makes it a crime to forcibly assault, resist, impede, or intimidate or interfere with federal officers engaged in their duties. And we're seeing that happen in real time. It's why there's over 1,000% increase in assaults on federal ICE agents. It's because it's a combination of both Pritzker and Johnson's dangerous and vile rhetoric aimed at federal ICE agents. And it's also because of these executive orders that they've signed that prohibit local law enforcement from providing any assistance should they be in trouble.
This is really quite extraordinary. President Trump himself has said that based on their illegal orders, Pritzker and Brandon Johnson should be in jail. The president's comments came after reports that Chicago police officers had actually been ordered to stand down as ICE agents faced a hostile crowd in the Brighton Park area of Chicago. According to CWB Chicago, one ICE agent urgently radioed for backup, warning he was being surrounded. Instead of authorizing assistance, the Chicago Police Department leadership allegedly ordered city officers to retreat from the area entirely, leaving federal agents to fend for themselves. This is truly disgraceful. I don't understand the politics of this. In other words, who do Pritzker and Johnson think they are appealing to? We saw that when the president moved the National Guard into Washington, D.C., when the crime rates just got untenable, when the city was just incredibly dangerous for its residents, as well as anyone who was visiting or working there, that the local residents, regardless of whether they were African American, Hispanic, or whether they were Caucasians, overwhelmingly approved the president's move to bring safety and security to their neighborhoods and communities. So who do Pritzker and Johnson think they're appealing to here?
Well, Pritzker doesn't have a constituency. It's important for your listeners to know that he's spent nearly $400 million of his own money. He's a billionaire of his own money to be elected governor twice. So he doesn't have a constituency. He's literally bought the governor's seat. But he's playing to the far left progressive George Soros types of the Democratic Party, the AOCs, the progressive liberals that hate America, that prioritize lawbreakers over law-abiding citizens, and he's losing support across the city of Chicago. We're seeing evidence of that. The streets are a war zone, yet Pritzker likes to get up early in the morning and take video of a park at 6 o'clock in the morning, talking about how peaceful it is. Well, Pritzker, all the violent criminals are asleep because they've created chaos between the hours of 1 and 3:30 a.m. And he's also not telling you that he's surrounded by about a dozen heavily armed bodyguards and a bulletproof SUV. But the residents know in Chicago that the city is a war zone. The streets are dangerous. There's 150,000 gang members and only 11,000 police officers. They're far outnumbered, but yet Pritzker likes to think that it's okay to prioritize illegals over law-abiding citizens. And what the sad part is that critical programs, maternal health programs, hospitals in the south and west sides of Chicago in predominantly black neighborhoods, they're shutting down because of little or no funding. Chicago has some of the highest infant mortality rates in the country, and instead of allocating money to save the lives of little black babies, Pritzker and Johnson instead want to put $2.5 billion to make sure that illegal aliens, lawbreakers, have free health care. It's an unpopular perspective. Nationally, Americans are against this. They support the president and his actions going into these democratic cities. And Pritzker and Johnson are on the wrong side of the law on this issue. And lastly, they're on the wrong side of history on this issue.
Doing away with cash bail has proved to be an enormous mistake in the city of New York. The city of New York's crime statistics are heavily doctored, so the crime statistics that the New York City Police Department, the once great New York City Police Department, which is now a woke agency, reports to the FBI are heavily manipulated. Cash bail has not worked out for New York State at all, yet Illinois Democrats and J.B. Pritzker have done away with cash bail, which I think adds to the problem in the city of Chicago. As I recall, Pritzker is fabulously wealthy. Pritzkers are, of course, the famous Hyatt Hotel family. He spent his own personal money to buy the governorship twice. Mark, you told me recently that he basically funds the entire Democrat Party as well as the Democrat ticket. In a state that has unfortunately become redder and redder. Do you believe that it is still possible? Pardon me, bluer and bluer, I misspoke. Do you believe it is possible that Illinois could yet elect a Republican governor?
Absolutely. And what my favorite part of this, Roger, is yes, he is an heir to the Hyatt Hotel fortune, and he's worth almost $4 billion. But he hates paying property taxes. And in fact, when he was running for governor, it was revealed that he bought a mansion next to his in the Gold Coast neighborhood of downtown Chicago. And he instructed the plumbers to rip out all the toilets in the mansion so that it could legally be uninhabitable. Why? Because he didn't want to pay over $300,000 in property taxes. This is the same guy who bought the governor's seat by spending nearly $400 million of his own money. But you know what Pritzker and Johnson have done has destroyed our city. You talk about no cash bail, 67,000. Here's a specific number for you: 67,000 criminals are free and out on the streets today because of no cash bail. And how do we know that? Because they've all missed their court hearings. 67,000 criminals missed their court hearings. What did Chicago do? They sent them a postcard in the mail and said, "Sorry, we missed you at your hearing. Hopefully you come back next time." And so we're seeing this 90% of violent and dangerous criminals are out on the streets, along with the 67,000. Why? Because they've never been identified or charged. If you want to create a violent crime, if you want to create murder or be involved and participate in mass shootings, you got to do it in the city of Chicago, because the justice system is not for the victim. The justice system is for the criminal, and it is so backwards. But Governor Pritzker has presidential aspirations. A national poll had him polling at just 2%. He's wildly unpopular, but it is possible that Chicago can turn red because of what's happening, the money being reallocated to illegal aliens, while they want to raise taxes in order to make up for the difference. The black community is outraged that they're bearing black babies because of high infant mortality rates because there's no funding. We are going to see, I think we're seeing a realignment of politics in America, and it's going to start in the city of Chicago. And mark my words, I believe we will, under President Trump's leadership and his strong, tough on crime policies, we will flip Chicago red.
Well, I would love to see that. I would truly love to see that. You're right about looking at the early polling. I mean, assuming a field that could include California Governor Gavin Newsom. Just this past week, former Vice President Kamala Harris told us that she's not finished. And she would, for the Democrat nomination, be extraordinarily formidable, having just spent $400 million between her campaign and PAC money to be a candidate for president. Bernie Sanders, I don't know if he's going to try yet again. He skimmed so much money in media placement fees for he and his wife, which is not illegal, but without disclosing that to your donors, I'm not sure it is ethical. He skimmed millions from his 2 presidential campaigns, so he may be in for yet another grift. But it seems to me that their bench is very, very thin. I would think that Newsom and Kamala Harris both having a base out of California, that is initially problematic, probably for both of them, but more so for Newsom, who is trying to reinvent himself yet again. All these candidates, however, seem to think that by grabbing the most left, most crazed, progressive agenda of the Democrat Party is the way to get nominated. A Bill Clinton, if he existed today within the confines of the Democrat Party, a moderate Democrat governor, Bill Clinton actually wanted to balance the federal budget. No Democrat says that today, could not get nominated in their party. I think their party has been taken over by a radical Marxist clique. And that clique is led by AOC, by Jasmine Crockett, by that pompous old socialist windbag Bernie Sanders, and Democrats like Brandon Johnson. Brandon Johnson, the mayor of Chicago, who has a 150-person security squad protecting him, according to what I read last week. He says there is no danger. I think he keeps calling for insurrection against the government. I think he has stepped over the line in his public comments when the president seeks to fulfill his constitutional authority to detain, arrest, and deport violent, illegal criminals. So the Democrats have no candidate. The Republican Party has obviously a strong candidate in J.D. Vance, the sitting vice president, who's demonstrating the energy. I thought his speech at Turning Point USA yesterday was really exceptional. We also have a strong bench for our ticket. Marco Rubio is turning out to be a standout as Secretary of State. Tulsi Gabbard, of course, who exposed the entire Russian collusion hoax. They have no bench. The Republican Party has a substantial bench, and Donald Trump is compiling a strong record to run on, both in the economy and also in the area of foreign policy, where he is rightfully won the title of peacemaker. Nobody could have ever predicted his diplomatic prowess, but pulling together all of these peace deals, which I've argued right here in the Stone Zone should entitle him to the Nobel Peace Prize, America is indeed headed for a golden age. I'm Roger Stone. We're talking to Mark Vargas, the editor-in-chief of the Illinois Review. Whatever you do, we'll be back with more politics, so please don't touch that dial.
Wherever Bud goes, his harmonica goes with him. It's a pocket full of soul. Now he's living with prostate cancer. He asked his doctor about Xtandi enzalutamide. Xtandi 40 milligram tablets treats men with prostate cancer that has spread to other parts of the body and responds to a medical or surgical treatment to lower testosterone. Xtandi may cause serious side effects: seizure, a brain condition called PRESS, allergic reactions, heart disease that can lead to death, falls and bone fractures, swallowing problems, or choking that can lead to death. Stop Xtandi and get medical help at once if your face, tongue, lip, or throat start swelling. Tell your doctor at once if you faint, have a seizure, quickly worsening headache, decreased alertness, confusion, vision problems, chest pain or discomfort, or shortness of breath. Xtandi can cause harm to an unborn baby or miscarriage. Use birth control during and 3 months after Xtandi. Common side effects include muscle and joint pain, feeling unusually tired, hot flashes, constipation, less appetite, diarrhea, high blood pressure, bleeding, falls, fractures, and headache. Talk to your doctor and visit Xtandi.com.
The Stone Zone, entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back. I appreciate those warm words from Vice President J.D. Vance. We're talking to Mark Vargas, the editor-in-chief of the Illinois Review. Mark, in the early mornings of this past Friday, Illinois lawmakers quietly passed one of the most dangerous and unconstitutional measures in the state's history, according to a piece that you have up today on the Illinois Review. Cloaked in compassionate language about safe zones, this bill is nothing more than a political stunt, you say, that undermines the rule of law and puts federal law enforcement officers directly in the crosshairs. HB 1312 designates so-called safe zones around schools, hospitals, and courthouses, and it gives private citizens the power to sue federal immigration officers for alleged violations of constitutional rights, including claims of false imprisonment or unlawful detention. I think they would actually have that anyway. But let's be clear what this really means. If a federal immigration and customs enforcement agent, you write, makes a lawful arrest that an activist later disagrees with, that agent could be sued in state court simply for doing his or her job. Tell us about what's going on here.
Isn't it just remarkable that you've got the Illinois Democrats who have a supermajority control in Springfield? Their grip on power is so strong that they don't even need any input from a single Republican in either the House or Senate chambers. And around 2 o'clock this morning, actually, is when they passed this bill. They like to talk about that this is protecting civil rights, when in fact, Roger, it's actually weaponizing state law to intimidate federal officers. But more than that, I believe in talking with other legal experts and attorneys that this is completely unacceptable and unconstitutional. Why? Because of the supremacy clause of the United States Constitution, which makes federal law the supreme law of the land, and that states like Illinois cannot pass laws that obstruct, penalize, or interfere with federal operations. And I want to make a particular point here. Think about you or I or any other citizen, law-abiding citizen, Roger, citizens that listen to your show. Imagine if we put together legislation or if we put together policies or signed executive orders as private citizens that endangered the lives of federal officers, particularly federal ICE agents. Where would we be? We would be locked up. We would be arrested and locked up in 0.003 seconds. Yet the Illinois Democrats, led by Pritzker and Johnson, have created laws, have created executive orders that put federal agents' lives in grave danger. And now they want to arrest them. Pritzker has created just last week, if you remember, Roger, he's created a new commission to document the names of all the federal ICE agents so that at some point when a Democrat is elected president of the United States, that they can prosecute every single one of them. But the United States Supreme Court has been clear. There are multiple cases going back to the early 1800s and as recently as 2012 that reaffirm the same principle. States may not obstruct federal authority.
Yeah, we've seen the same thing in New York, where New York Attorney General Letitia James has set up a portal so that people can report the identities of ICE agents. My fear, of course, is that she's going to dox those agents and put their lives and the lives of their families in danger. Again, I think that these activities are legal under federal law. But it's the same playbook. They weaponize the criminal justice system against Republicans, and they attempt to rig the system against ICE agents who are simply trying to keep their job. All right, we have to wrap it up there. Mark, tell people where folks can follow the Illinois Review.
Follow us at IllinoisReview.com on our website, Illinois Review on X, and they can follow me at X at Mark A. Vargas.
There you have it. Thanks for joining us today in the Stone Zone. Remember, a man is not finished when he is defeated. He only is finished when he quits. And in the fight for liberty and freedom, I will never quit. That's why we're here 5 days a week talking about news, history, politics, style, occasionally talk about food. So join us in the Stone Zone for more of our incisive political analysis, things I've learned in my 50 years in the corroded rectum of the two-party system. Thanks for joining us. Until the next time, God bless you and Godspeed.
Thanks for listening to The Stone Zone with Roger Stone. You can hear The Stone Zone with Roger Stone weeknights at 8 on 77 WABC. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode, so you never have to wonder.
What the heck is going on here?